Introducing Dr. Bill Doherty is a challenge. His accomplishments are too many to describe in a short period of time. One possibility is this introduction might last longer than his presentation, but I'll assure you, Bill, I'll avoid that temptation. Bill has authored 15 books, over 150 journal articles and book chapters, and countless numbers of magazine and newspaper publications. He's currently a member of 10 editorial boards for scholarly journals and has been on the boards of an additional 5. He has appeared twice on Oprah, twice on 2020, 3 times on the Today and CBS Morning News Show, and in CBS, ABC, NBC Evening News broadcasts. He was not in those broadcasts because he did something wrong, but because he was worthy of good news. His work has been featured in Redbook, Reader's Digest, Ladies' Home Journal, Better Homes and Gardens, Family Circle, and numerous other magazines and newspapers. Bill is a leader. He is currently director of the Family Therapy Program at the University of Minnesota. He's been president of the National Council on Family Relations, as well as holding numerous leadership positions in the American Association for Marital and Family Therapy, Family Systems and Health, the National Institute of Mental Health, and other organizations. He has won numerous professional awards from these national associations and several teaching awards, which are further described in your program. One academic degree at each level was not sufficient for Bill. Besides his doctoral degree in family studies, he earned 2 master's degrees, one in child development and family relationships, and the other in theology, and he received an honorary doctorate from the University of Guelph in Canada. As a young man, Bill did pastoral field work in Washington, D.C. with African American families. He stated in a published autobiography, "For the first time, I had glimpses inside families other than my own, and I was hooked on their fascinating relationships and dynamics." His decades of work in family therapy, moral responsibility of therapists, family life education, families and health care, responsible fatherhood, and helping attorneys recognize that couples who are in the divorce process might actually want to reconcile if the correct approaches were used. These all show that he's never lost his passion for marriages, families, and children. His more recent Families and Democracy project and community activism involves helping concerned citizens strengthen families. An example of this work is illustrated by a statement he helped draft with a citizens group, quote, "Today, parents see themselves as competitive providers of services to children, while children are overscheduled in a frantic pursuit of experiences and opportunity for personal enrichment and advantage over peers. Family Life First is a group of citizens committed to building a community in which family life has first priority in an overbusy and overscheduled world," end of quote. With all these overwhelming accomplishments, Bill is still down to earth. He's engaging, full of humor, always good for a most interesting conversation, including a willingness to suspend his own ideas to listen to yours. I am honored to introduce him. We are in for a very special treat tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim, for that beautiful introduction. My microphone working? Okay. My heart is already full after 2 days here. Of experiencing the warmth of this community, its local and national and international impact, and gotten to know Mrs. Hinckley a little bit through the video and through her children. So motherhood is on my mind, because particularly watching that video with her children here, and then Jim mentioned Oprah. When I made Oprah, my mother knew I had made it. The rest of all that stuff you read, that was nice. And something my mother said to me, and when I had been on Oprah for the first time, just came back to me during the introduction and influenced by the video of Mrs. Hinckley. My mother said, and this would be a mother speaking, she said, "I could tell that Oprah liked you." Now, my mother could document things. So I said, "How do you know, Mom, that she liked me?" And she said, "Oprah shook your hand longer than anybody else's." So I watched the video, and I with a stopwatch, and she was right. The other thing I want to really note was in the video with Mrs. Hinckley. Remember what she said about those summers? She said about that unstructured time. And one of her daughters said at the meal just before the presentation, something like, "It didn't take much to make Mother happy." So that's a perfect setup to the presentation and conversation I want to have with you on the topic of parenting wisely in a too much of everything world, because I think that we think we need a lot to make us happy. We have my wife who is here with me. We've been married for 37 years. We have two children who are in their 30s. We have 3 grandchildren. And so it's quite an opportunity through seeing my children raise their children to be aware of how much more challenging it is, I believe, to raise children wisely than it even was when we were raising our children in the 70s and 80s. There are so many resources. There are so many opportunities. There's so much to do. There's so much to offer our children that wisdom and balance are difficult. So what I want to do with the presentation, there are going to be some times I'm going to ask you to call out some responses to a question. I'm going to be presenting some information. There'll be an academic part of this. And then there'll be an interesting video. Then there'll be some conversation about how we've gotten into the challenges that we are in now. And then before I finish, some ideas about what we can do about them. But first, I'd like to ask, what do you think is too much today in the lives of children? The question then is, what's too much? And let's not just do like too much of evil things, okay? But too much of what could be good on its own, but ratcheted up gets to be too much. So, you with me? You willing to call out some things? Okay. What is an example of too much? Sports. Computers. Technology. TV. Homework. Expectations. What kind of expectations?
All of them.
All of them. They have to be stars, right? They have to be academically proficient. They have to be musically. They have to be everything. Anything else? Junk food. Junk food. What else is too much?
Video games.
Video games.
Texting.
Texting. Just that whole world of technology.
High school proms.
High school proms. What, they go to too many here? But the high school proms have ratcheted up, right? For older ones, weddings have ratcheted up, right? Birthday parties. Lessons. So let's just take that one on. So weddings ratchet up. Proms ratchet up. Some of us, I was in my, well, actually we didn't have a limo at our wedding, did we? But anyway, we might have. But there weren't any limos in Elkhorn, Iowa. But so some people might be in their first limo at their wedding. And now you're in then it moves down to the high school prom. And then it moves down to the sweet 16 birthday. And then there are communities in this country where 7-year-olds get picked up to go to birthday parties in limos. Okay? So it moves down and down and down. Now, there's nothing individually wrong with those things, but if you want to think about, the old, before the computers, you'd have a keyboard where you could dial up, ratchet up all the treble and the bass and all these things. It's like parents now have all of these dimensions of their child's life that they can ratchet up one after the other. And it's very hard to keep their balance. And in the process, children grow up too fast. Is anybody concerned about the moving down in the life cycle of girls' clothing? Okay. So it's, in fact, the mother just today was saying that it's very hard to find decent clothing for a 7-year-old daughter because they're all looking like Britney Spears and adolescents. So it's particularly difficult. And so what I want to do is to begin with a video from the Today Show that is going to be on one of the two topics I want to discuss in more depth tonight. The first one is the scheduling of our children. Notice the timing here. Aren't we exquisite? The screen comes down. We practiced this earlier today. So I want to show you a video to get you thinking and feeling about this, and then I'm going to present some data we have about this particular issue. The context of the video game is something I'll refer to at the end of my talk. I see myself as a cultural organizer with parents to try to call attention to problems that had not yet been named. And so the problem of overscheduled children had not been named yet in 1999-2000 when a group got started. So when we started our publicity, the Today Show producer called and said, we got to do this, because she was feeling enormous pressure to have her kids and everything. So what they did was the NBC cameras asked for a family to volunteer to be followed in their Wednesday afternoon and evening schedule. By the way, if a network producer ever calls you and say, could we follow you around, say no. Okay. And presumably this is a good family. I have no desire to knock them personally, but this is a family that is living in the fast lane of mainstream American culture. So this will be a couple of minutes. You'll hear Katie Couric's voice in the background.
7 a.m. in Pompton Plains, New Jersey. The Rasco family eats breakfast and plans their day's after-school activities.
Here you go. The kids have a schedule, and we like to keep them happy and busy.
And busy they are. 3 o'clock. School's out, and 14-year-old Annie is in band practice. 11-year-old Timmy is doing his homework in the car while waiting until his 6-year-old sister Teresa is finished with school. Then it's home for a snack with Teresa and a friend, and more homework for Tim. 4 o'clock. Anne's now in cheerleading practice while Teresa is in gymnastics. 4:45. Mom, Annie, and Tim have a fast dinner. 5 o'clock. Dad's back from work and grabs dinner. Then he's off with Annie to a voice lesson. Timmy has baseball practice.
They like these things. It's not like we're forcing them to go.
Meanwhile, Teresa arrives home from gymnastics, has her dinner.
Annie and Timmy and Mommy and Daddy ate already. But you're going to eat. Mommy's going to have some coffee, okay?
And then she tackles her homework.
7.
6 o'clock. Teresa has a piano lesson. 6:25. Annie returns and goes straight to her piano lesson.
Ready?
6:45. Timmy has religion class.
God is always there for you.
7:45. Annie's doing her homework. Teresa's ready for bed.
Okay, night-night. Have a good sleep.
8:30. Timmy's finally home, and the kids' combined 8 after-school activities are over for the day.
We want our kids to be happy. We want them to be well-rounded. They seem well-adjusted, and we think we're doing a pretty good job.
Okay. I'm a therapist, so the first question is feelings. What feelings came up in you as you watched? Just call one out. Pardon me? Stressed? Okay. Tired? Anxious? What was that one? Very familiar. That was a young person talking. Wasn't familiar up here, was it? Okay, but very familiar. Any other feelings? Solitary. Solitary. Felt kind of, what's that? A headache. Okay. Well, that's the next question now. Feelings done. The next question is, what did you see What did you observe that gave you some concern? So could you start?
The mom was speaking for the children.
The mom was saying, she was speaking for the children, saying they like these things. We don't know if they do like these things. Okay? In fact, when a New York Times reporter came to begin to cover this story in the year 2000, that was the first big media thing. There was a New York Times reporter who just had a child, and she was concerned about how children were being raised. And I pitched the story to her. She called me about a marriage story, and I said, hey, we're working on this. Then she talked to her editor who had a child in traveling soccer. And then they said, that's how we'll do it. See, when people in the media world experience a problem personally, they're more apt to give you space. So that reporter came to the Twin Cities and was interviewing parents and kids for 2 days. And she was interviewing a father and his teenage son, the father the head of the youth football program, the son a young football star. Nobody had ever asked this boy around his father, do you like this? Are you enjoying this? And he said no. And the father was stunned. And the father joined our movement. So that's an interesting point that we don't know what the kids thought. What else did you see in the video?
They didn't eat dinner together.
They did not eat dinner together. They ate in shifts. How'd you feel with that little girl kind of eating? Yeah, it felt sad, eating by herself with her mother there. What else did you notice and see? There was no whole family time. Now, what's interesting, the research indicates when you do time diary studies, we have families keep detailed records of their time. Children do not have less time with a parent now, at least in two-parent families, than they did 30 or 40 years ago. Even though more mothers are in the workforce, they don't have less time with a parent. They have less family time. In fact, what's happened is there's less time given to housework and that kind of thing, and parents are optimizing time with the child. So if you count as family time, as parent-child time, driving them everywhere, okay, then they had time, right? But what's the downside of not having family time?
A feeling of belonging and loved by others.
Yeah, a feeling of belonging and being loved by the whole group. Family meals are where the family is part of where the family culture is created when people are together. What else did you notice in the video? Yes?
There's no way to convey your values in discussions especially with the dad and your dad.
Well, she said two things. There was no way to convey the values. When your time with your children is all logistical time, it's hard to have those conversations. And the dad in particular, we didn't see him at all. Now, in fairness, we got a glimpse of their week, and hopefully there's more. So again, this is not to knock this particular family. But the parents were pleased with a day like this. See, what that suggests is a cultural norm. That's really what I'm after here in the conversation, is that this becomes a cultural norm. And in fact, as one mother said in a suburban county outside Minneapolis, bragging rights in her community is not about how big is your house or how fancy is your car. It's how busy is your family. Oh, you think you're busy. In fact, where I live, I don't know if it's true here, asking somebody, keeping busy, what are you supposed to say in answer to that? Yes. And that's a sign that you're healthy. Like, you doing okay? Yeah? Okay. Keeping busy? So the group of parents I was working with, our little revolutionary cell, we decided to stop using the word busy as a positive. Okay? Our little effort there. Anything you noticed about the siblings? Anything you noticed about the siblings? They had no time together. In a world that's organized vertically, parents take kids somewhere, kids go and they have a coach or a teacher work with them, the same age group. What you don't have is this sibling, different child generations together. And you then lack some of the opportunities that come from having to interact with a pesky younger sibling or an older one who you have to convince to let you in. These are very important skills in life, okay? Okay, but when you show up and the adults say this is what you do, you don't ever have to do that. In fact, The child developmentalists are really quite concerned about the decline in unstructured playtime because there's a set of skills, social skills, that occur there that do not occur in structured time. Now, in structured sports time, you do learn more skills, by at least the right way to do certain things, presumably. But when you don't have the unstructured time, what you don't have is what we used to call the olden days going out to play. Now we call it unstructured time, okay? But think about the skill sets involved, the learning involved in going out to play. First of all, you have to find somebody and convince them to play with you. You have to negotiate what you're going to play. If that involves more than 2 children, you have to convince another group of children. And sometimes that means negotiating something other than what you originally were going to do. Okay? Then who teaches you how to play? You teach each other. If you need that pesky little sibling, you have to teach them because you need the kid in the group, right? And then who enforces the rules? The group do. Well, the oldest, that's her family there. A little authoritarian streak there, okay? But yeah, the group has to, as opposed to having an umpire. And then you have to decide when to stop. In fact, if you can't manage to handle conflict about the rules, you have to stop playing. Okay, a mother who had a daughter who was 16 and a champion softball player, one summer day the girl was bored and her mother said, well, why don't you go find some friends and have a pickup game of soccer, or of softball? And the girl said, who would umpire? And the mother realized she had never played her beloved sport without an adult in charge. So what we have there is an example of something that we're beginning to learn about in research. And I want to just summarize some of the things we've learned and also some of the complexities of it. The best sources of data are time diaries. And the University of Michigan had a couple of time diaries over a 25-year period, the late 70s into the late 90s. That's our best source of comparison about children's time. It's not been updated since then. And they were focusing on children ages 3 to 12, national representative sample. And they found that children in that age group had lost 12 hours per week of free time. They play less, and their unstructured time has declined significantly. A doubling of their structured sports time, and increasing specialization, by the way, this is other reports from the American Academy of Pediatrics, an increasing specialization in sports at younger and younger ages. The day of the 3-sport athlete is long gone. And what do you think some of the downsides of specializing in one sport at an early age are? Burnout, injuries, okay? Pediatricians are quite concerned about this, and as I said, the American Academy of Pediatrics has a really good report on this you can look at online. They're now seeing Tommy John elbow surgeries, major recrafting of the elbow in little leaguers. And it was named for an old pitcher who probably should have retired sooner, who threw his elbow out, okay? So you get repetitive injuries and you get burnout. What's interesting is the real sports enthusiasts that I have worked with, and some of the parents I've worked with are very enthusiastic about youth sports. Direct programs, love it, are very concerned about kids losing their joy of the sport because they have played it too long. A basketball coach from the high school in Wayzata, Minnesota, where we launched this national conversation, called me to say, I really support this effort of the parents in this Family Life First project. He said that when he gets these boys at the varsity level, sophomores, they have played too many years already. It used to be, when I was growing up, you couldn't play basketball until you were strong enough to get the ball up 10 feet, right? And that was 5th or 6th grade. Now you move it down. And he said they've been overcoached by their fathers. Too many of them have lost the joy in the sport. They've never played for fun. So he does this radical intervention. Sometimes he just says, here's the ball, go play, have fun. Ask me if you have a question. because they have lost their joy in the sport. So specialization is an interesting thing. Also connected with that, by the way, is this bifurcation, if you will. By the time you're 11, you're either excelling and you move to the traveling teams and the specialized teams, or you're siphoned off to something that's second rate. What the pediatricians and the developmentalists tell us is you cannot predict very well adolescent and adult sports skills based on pre-puberty abilities. So it's not really rational to take a kid who's kind of gimpy and not so good at age 9 or 10 and make sure they don't have advanced opportunities. And then you also burn out some of those other kids. Children's time in religious participation has declined by 40% over a 25 or 30-year period. Family household conversations, that is talking together as a family with no other activity going, you're just talking as a family. That declined from very small to the average family having no time in a week where just talking together was the average activity. Family vacations have declined by about 28% over a period of 30 years. Now, some of that is adult work schedules, for sure. Some of it is the structured activities of children. So here's a story of, and I tell the story, this is of